7 or 8 different niches. I hear about people doing that. Hey, I just got into real estate last year. And I say, what are you doing? And they start to tell me, and it's a 7 paragraph description. And I was taught, again, when I first started, a really good real estate investor will be able to say what they do in one sentence.
Financial independence,
freedom,
financial picture,
independent financially,
financial future,
financial freedom and wealth,
financial independence.
Get your fill, financial independence and long life. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life, where we explore ways to achieve those two goals. Cool people come on and help us out. And today we have Jim Sheils. He is, did I say that right, or is it Sheils?
Sheils, you got it right.
Sheils. All right, great. Today we have Jim Sheils. He's a real estate expert with extensive knowledge in the build to rent niche. He's a partner at Southern Impression Homes, a company that specializes in building rental portfolios in Florida's high growth markets for individual investors and institutional buyers. In addition, Jim is the co-owner, co-founder of 18 Summers, providing family education services to entrepreneurs and professionals seeking to strengthen their family relationships while succeeding in business. Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, great to be here.
So I guess let's quickly talk about that, because that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is this idea of working really hard and making a successful business, but also not being a complete, phantom dad or phantom family member. How did you manage that? Is that how it started out? Like you were like, I'm doing this business thing, I'm hitting it hard, but I'm also going to right away make sure that I'm focusing on my family.
Yeah, I think that I had to get intentional, and intentional kind of had to be pushed onto me. I remember it was 2011. I was sent an article right after Steve Jobs died, and it was really interesting. It talked about the famous biographer. I can't remember his name right now, but he was interviewed by Time magazine a few days after Steve passed away, and the article said that Steve Jobs spent his final days doing interviews trying to explain to his family why he wasn't there for them. And that hit me really hard. And the biographer said, what, Steve, are you glad, in the article is what it said, are you glad you had a family? Are you glad you had children? And he said, it's 10,000 times better than anything I've ever done. And that kind of hit me, because at the time I was watching all the murals going up and candlelight vigils. And, obviously I'm not knocking Steve Jobs' accomplishments. I'm an entrepreneur, and so I'm kind of in awe of that side, but it seems like he may have kind of been a stranger at home. And so that kind of terrified me. I was going through a lot in my life right then, running 2 real estate businesses, wife, 2 children. We now have 5 children. So we're in the midst of growing our family through all sorts of stuff. I had just been approved to donate a kidney to my father a few days earlier. So there was a lot going on. And I think I got pushed to a point of critical there. And, we owning 2 real estate companies sounds great. Maybe now. In 2011, we were just very short time after 2008, 2009, where many people who did what I did went bankrupt. And that could have happened to me. And luckily I held on, protected my investors, and moved through, but it was not easy. Yeah. So all these things just hit a point of critical, Christine, and it just changed the way that I looked at family life, and it kind of carried with me, and out of a very organic thing that I didn't even want to do, I started to share some things at different business events about family that resonated. And then I was asked to write a book, and that book ended up doing really well, surprisingly, my wife and I. And that was kind of the inception of it. And the whole premise was, I'm not saying you want to be successful in business and successful at home. So I've just learned, I've tried to put some real simple strategies and rhythms into my family life that are non-negotiable, and eventually end up improving business, I think, making me a better businessman, because I've seen way too many guys that run out of steam because they're on such an empty tank on that part of their life.
Yeah, it's so easy to get wrapped up into the business, right? You get into that crisis mode and you just it's all very adrenaline rich, and and then you go home and, it's not necessarily so exciting unless you're fighting with everybody all the time, right? So there's this, and I think it's like it's addictive, right? To be like, oh, I gotta go. I'm so important at work and you guys think I'm a jerk, like I don't want to stay here.
Oh, exactly. Well, and people, people, I think it's easier to be a good entrepreneur than a good father or husband. And that's what a lot of, I think, driven people do. They say they're doing it for their family. Um, but it's easier to dig deeper into the business, like you said, because if you're the boss, well, then you also have you're not, there's no sovereign boss at home, right? There's a lot of, equal playing field of with your wife and how you interact with your children, how to lead, but not, be dictatorial by any means. That doesn't
Right.
work very well. But at work, you might like you said, you might get praised easier or be able to see, more goals that are amplified or highlighted. And, a lot of the victories at home are very quiet, very tiring without medal or award. And so it's different and it can be hard for some people to really dive into.
And they could take years, right? Well, first of all, we know we can't make goals that involve other people. So I can't say my goal is for my kid to do XYZ
Mm-mm.
because that's up to them. But also, being a good parent, you might not know that you're a good parent for a really long time until you see how they sort of start to turn out.
I agree. It's a long process. It's planting the seed and you're saying, is this working? I'm watering, I'm nurturing. And yeah, you have to have patience, faith, and consistency, I think, in certain things. But a lot of people aren't willing to give that, and that's the sad thing. So I just was pretty committed that I was not going to sacrifice family success for business success. And so that right there, even when you kind of draw the line in the sand, your mind starts to think differently. How could I do things differently? You how can I align my business practices so if I do want to see my family more, that can be arranged, that I can have the best of both worlds. If you don't even think it's possible, well, it's not.
And that aligns with what any good business coach will tell you too, right? You need to get away from the business in order to see it in a different way.
Mhm.
Great things always happen when I go on vacation, right? I'm like, I'm going to be out of the office, like, oh no. But then when I get out of there, my brain just works in a different way and I get these great ideas and, things just kind of materialize out of the ether. And it's hard to convince people who have not taken a vacation or who don't have that balance that it's really a good thing.
I know. I know. Yeah, yeah, you gotta, what is it, the old Stephen Covey, you gotta sharpen the saw. And if you're not, then you're just working with that dull axe trying to cut down a tree, and that's working twice as hard and more prone to injury and all sorts of things. So yeah, it does good, that's for sure. Like you're saying, you can't sprint the whole way. Although bringing up business coaches, there were business coaches. I mean, I've been a real estate investor entrepreneur for almost 26 years now, just turned 50. And there were coaches that would say, put your head down for 5, 10 years, make it happen. Your family will understand. I think that's horrendous advice. That's horrible advice. The years are not all created equal. Our family education company is called 18 Summers because the average person, spends about 85% of all the quality time they ever have with their child by the end of the 18th summer. Now, I think you can extend that if you do the first 18 right. I think you can have a lot more time after that. Not if you don't do the first 18 right. And you miss out on that time, those real nurturing needed years. So yeah, it's not an easy dance, Christine. But again, the more intentionally you get and unapologetic you get, and that doesn't mean you're aggressive or pompous about it, but you're unapologetic. Like, no, I'm gonna absolutely do my best, but I'm gonna spend time with my family. It, it's
Yeah.
tough to make it happen.
And it changes your whole life and
Mm.
theirs as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So how did you get started? Were you always like right out of the gate, you were doing real estate, right? So 24, if I'm doing my math correctly.
Yeah, that was the age I started looking. I knew I wanted to go off on my own. I spent about a year in corporate America, pharmaceutical advertising, and it's about as boring as it sounds, at least for me. And I just was searching to go into some sort of business on my own. And I kept coming back to real estate. And I just liked the tangibility. It made sense. I take something, improve it, the value goes up. You can someone renting from you to pay down expense, make a cat. It made sense to me.
Yeah.
So it started with one property, 432 North M Street in California, Lompoc, California. I never People say, "What's the best real estate investing class you ever took?" I said, "Well, that was it, 432 North M Street."
Nothing like
So
hands-on.
yeah, it started with one, saving the down payment and repairs, bringing in a partner. It was very organic, but I had a draw to it. I grew up a half hour from Wall Street. I had zero draw to that form of financial
Investing. Yeah.
instrument and strategy. Real estate was more tangible. It made sense to me. So yeah, that's how it all started.
So were you hands-on at first? Did you
I
like
was
start?
the
Yeah.
first two properties. I was hands-on on the rehabs, and I learned very quickly that I'm terrible at rehabs personally. Horrible. I mean, I'm not. I remember my contractor buddy who agreed to help me on that first one is just like, oh man, what are you doing? And it's funny because as I've gotten into real estate and investing and grown and gotten done educating, people are like, wow, you must be really good at rehabs. You've done over 1,000 rehabs. And I say, I'm terrible at them. Horrible. If you won't put me in the trenches, we're in big trouble. There's going to be air conditionings blowing up, plumbing going in wrong. But I don't do the work. I'm very good at forming the teams and assessing what needs to be done, but I'm not good at doing it myself. And I think that's a big thing where people say to me, hey, I'm going to start rehabbing houses to flip them and make money. I'm really good at, doing that kind of work. Okay, that's only a small part of the game. And at the same time, so you could, but also there's number and strategy and things that you need to know how to do, other things besides the actual fix it work. And then other people say to me, oh, I could never rehab houses. I'm not good at doing that work. Who I know that's not true because of me and my background. So anyway, it's things are not always as they seem, if that makes sense, of what you might be good at. Um, you might not even be able to see, but there's different ways to make it happen. And again, teamwork, real estate investing is a team sport. Anyone who says it's a single man sport is probably not done much.
Yeah, it's true. And it's so easy with all these, HGTV type programs to think that that's really all that's involved. If you can't swing a hammer, you really can't do the job. But when you actually start to do it, you realize how much more there is to being successful. And those are
Mhm.
some of the people who I know who've lost the most is people who just thought, well, I've just got to, do this myself. I'm going to, go in there. I'm going to fix it up. I'm going to do whatever. But they never ask people for advice on where they should put their money, right? I have a friend who ripped out the whole exterior perimeter of the foundation because he found a little teacup full of water on the bottom. I said, you are never going to see that money again. That is just if you were going to live there for the next 50 years, maybe that makes sense. But you're never going to recoup that money because nobody gives a crap about that. No one's willing to pay you an extra $80,000 for the house because there's not a teacup full of water in the basement.
Well, and you brought it up well. I know for a fact a lot of those TV shows, they're TV. They have to be entertainment. There has to be drama. You don't want drama in a rehab. You want something so easy, paint carpet, replace these few things, landscape, and it's done. That's what you really want. But they make it sound like it's got to be this grandiose story with these peaks and valleys. And the fact of the matter is, and this is good for people to know, most of those deals, especially the ones that started out, I don't follow them as closely now, but when those shows first started, years ago, the deals they were showing you on TV actually lost money. Most of those. They don't want to tell you that, but they actually lost money. And so I thought, man, that is very dangerous to glamorize and romanticize and dramatize something that all of my mentors said, you want simple, you don't want this, you don't want to take on a huge rehab to start, and so we're once again getting our education from entertainment and drama that doesn't really care about your financial well-being, and people follow it, and it can be quite disastrous.
Yeah. Well, and also everything's done in a half an hour, right? So you had all
Yeah,
these
you
problems,
get
but
all the
don't worry because
highlights.
they get resolved so
Exactly.
fast.
Yeah. You know, you take on that huge rehab that's overpriced. It's, you know, a lot of expensive repairs, lots of surprises. That's one thing in rehabs, when surprises come up. Uh, and that half-hour show doesn't show the 4 months of sleepless nights because you're going, oh my gosh, we can't get out of this. We're underwater.
Yeah.
These are the things that really happen that the shows don't show.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and if you're going through that right now, you're not alone. All of us have gone through that moment. But don't let the TV be like, gosh, but the TV told me. TV was lying to you. It's okay if you're going through that. You can get through and learn lessons. But a lot of people again go, gosh, why am I struggling so much? I'm the only one that's probably this happening to. Not true. Not
Not
true.
true.
Mm-mm.
No, we've all, anybody who, I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who's done real estate investing who hasn't made a mistake, who hasn't had one, at least one project where they were like, oh my God, I just had no idea what I was getting into. And I really wish I would have just knocked on that wall one last time and saw that it was going to disintegrate or whatever the case may be, you know?
And you learn lesson. And that's why now for the last 10 years, I only do new construction, which was almost like a bad word. My now building partner who came to me, yeah, about 2000, it was 2015, said, hey, what would you think about building our own houses instead of rehabbing old ones? I thought that was a horrible idea. You know, I'm a rehabber. What do you mean new construction? I don't know. Anyway, I'm glad I was convinced because you're always evolving and it had served a purpose at a stage in my life, but you know, it made me a return on my money, but the return on time was not good. It was bankrupting my time.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
new construction for myself and investors I work with, less less surprises, less headaches, less risk, better areas, longer tenants, less maintenance and repairs, better growth fundamentals. And so you evolve, you learn things. And that's one example of me going, no, I think I've had enough of these. They've served me well, but there could be something better.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of a team, right? You're in the thick of it. Maybe you didn't realize that that was a thing. Like, oh, new construction? Wait a minute. That's a whole mind shift, a whole paradigm shift. But, you know, you were lucky to be with the right people who had that idea and you were smart enough to listen to them.
Yeah, yeah. So and it started small like anything. You know, we threw in some development fees and tried a few houses and it went okay at best, but we could see there was a spark of potential there.
Yeah.
And now we could have never grown our business the way we've grown it trying to rehab old homes. The competition, the really hard or inability to scale, the setbacks that go with it, the level of contractor you normally have to work with on smaller deals opposed to building several properties at a time where you can work with bigger or
Yeah.
become your own builder like we've done. So anyway, these are just things, you know, in real estate investing, I would encourage you to get really good at a niche. And then, you know, if there's clear involvement into another niche, take it. But don't try to go into 7 or 8 different niches. I hear about people doing that. Hey, I just got into real estate last year. And I say, what are you doing? And they start to tell me, and it's a 7 paragraph description. And I was taught again when I first started, a really good real estate investor will be able to say what they do in one sentence. That's it. And that was like, wow. And so I hold myself to that. Am I starting to form a bunch of sentences here? You know, the sentence can change, you know, but what is the one sentence? And that's it.
Yeah. So are you more of a syndication model now? Or are you doing more turnkey stuff? Or what's,
So we do all turnkey new construction. We work with some bigger syndicators where we'll build bigger projects for them. But really, our main core business has always been the way it was. You know, the inception of it was, you know, investors working with investors. You know, we were here on the ground in Northeast Florida. There were a lot of great deals after the '08 meltdown, and so investors would hire me and my now partner out to find, you know, lots of foreclosures, get them renovated, keep some for ourselves. We'd work with them. And we still work with these individual investors. You know, we have over 1,000 active investors we work with that buy new construction. We do not do any fixer upper properties anymore. We stopped that years ago because of just looking at the comparison of results. The new construction, it was undeniable. So our main core is actually, we do turnkey where we will build the deal for you, finance the deal for you, and manage the deal for you. So we try to bring in all those components that are needed to succeed. And we build simple, you know, residential property, either a single family, duplex, or quad. That's what we stick to.
great. That's a super niche. Florida somewhat scares me as far as rehabs go because of, mold and mildew. You've got so much opportunity for dampness there. And, here we have burst pipes here in the Northeast. That's our big thing. And that's where you get the mold is when you get burst pipes. But, in Florida, you can have a house that's never had actual water damage. But then when you start to dig a little deeper, you're like, oh no, what's going on in this closet? What's going on in the attic? Whoa, we got a big mess here.
Yeah, and that can happen. And again, certain areas will have it happen more than others, and certain building design can breed it more as well. Older houses that were built differently on lower lying ground.
Yeah.
Uh, when you're again, one of the things I like about new construction, you can be preventative.
Yeah.
You build on higher grounds like our people say, oh my gosh, Florida, hurricanes. Well, what areas are you talking about? Florida has 29 million people spread out, and there's higher hurricane risk zones than others. And also there's houses that are more susceptible. Our houses have very affordable insurance, which people are shocked about. Even in some areas where there's been recent hurricanes like Southwest Florida near Fort Myers and such. Well, our properties through these storms have had very little to no damage. Why? Because they're built to a stronger structural design, and they're also built on higher ground. So an old house, in the 1950s, let's say in Fort Myers, you could build it at 2 feet above sea level to a different structural design. Today, we're building at 13, 14 feet above sea level, which is expensive. We got to bring in a lot of dirt, and we complain about it until that hurricane goes through and we're high and dry. We haven't had flooding. And so the insurance companies love that, respect that, and give us the insurance premiums to match that risk analysis. So you always got to search around, you know what I mean? There are always possibilities, but say, how do I minimize my risk with certain things? And that's what we've tried to do to design our whole real estate investing program. Okay, how can we minimize the risk in that? How can we minimize risk in that? How can we minimize risk in financing for our clients? We're always trying to minimize risk.
And that's actually an advantage for an investor that you are staying in. You're going to keep managing it. You're not just like, oh, here you go. Here's the keys. I'm out of here, right? I'm going to go build something in Tennessee now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing people, and I think that's why we've grown, we don't want to inherit our own problems. When you're in property management, you, contrary to popular opinion, the companies that make the most are the ones that don't have a lot of problems. So, and because it it just goes better, and financially the company does better. So that's why we love new construction as well, because there's less. So you don't want problems. So we don't want to inherit our own problems.
Right.
We have a giant office, the building company on one side, the PM on the other. They're in great communication. If we build a property that's not great, we know about it right away. If there's a problem, I've had experiences years ago where, yeah, it's great to have a builder's warranty, but what if I can't find the builder?
Right.
It's very easy for our PM to find the builder. We were the builder, our other company was, and that holds us to, I think, a higher standard, because we know even though we don't continue to own this property, and we work with the owners, and it's our responsibility to manage them best. And guess who's going to look terrible if those properties have flaws that are causing unnecessary maintenance and repairs? So that
Right.
that
Absolutely.
really which is great, holds us accountable, and makes us even better.
Absolutely. That's great. So what kind of advice, Jim, would you give to new investors, people who are kind of getting started? I love if you can't explain it in a sentence, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, I wouldn't try to go into a bunch of different, there's lots of niches in real estate. Flipping, I'm doing this, whatever it is, try to go into one and really focus on that one. And I also wouldn't encourage you, I'm gonna try to go into 5 metro markets, different. Man, you'll run thin. And when I started in California 26 years ago, I thought, well, I'm gonna maybe invest here and go down here, and these were markets 3 hours away from them. I remember it was 5 different markets I think I was going to do. I would have run ragged. I would have never gotten to understand a market really well. So I cleared out all the noise and said, okay, I'm going inland to Bakersfield, California. That's the only place I focus. So focusing on a market and a niche can be a really great starting point. Um, and then be brutally honest about what you can bring to the table, and that's absolutely key. And that's a great starting point, really.
Yeah, that's great advice. So people, who are your turnkey investors? Do you have like smaller investors who might be like doing some IRA, self-directed IRA stuff, or is it more big
We
corporate investors?
No, no. We do work with some of the larger institutions and family offices and hedge funds on bigger projects. We'll build them a big quad community or 200 house community. For our smaller investors, we I was always taught, go into an area where there's a good mixture of homeowners and renters. That balance. I don't want to go to an all quote unquote investor owned neighborhood. Those are usually tougher conditions, harder to resell, more turnover issues. And so we like to buy what's called infill lots in solid B areas where there's a good mixture of homeowners and renters, and build our new construction in these already existing neighborhoods that are well established and safe and have a good crime index. And so that's what we do. And our average investors, we have a good contingent of Florida investors, but a lot of outside the state coming from all over. The Northeast is a big one where I grew up. The numbers don't seem to pencil as well up there. The landlord laws are not as friendly. Same in California where I was. A lot of people from Utah, because Salt Lake, they had invested there, but the numbers have gone really crazy and they can't get our numbers or pricing. So we have people from all over the country. And normally they're busy professionals. They run a successful business or practice, or they're a very successful real estate agent in a more expensive market or lender. And so they know they should be in real estate, just haven't had the time to go in their backyard. So they plug into our system where instead of, do it yourself might be 20 to, 50 hours a month, with us, it's 2 to 3 hours a month. And so, our goal is that's our goal for them. And, they plug into us to our average successful core investors buy between 3 and 8 properties with us, and they see that as a residual future for them. And that's kind of our goal overall.
Excellent. Excellent. So, Jim, I appreciate everything that you've shared, but I bet there's a question that you wish I would have asked you that you wish we would have touched on that we haven't. So, what is that question?
I was on a pretty big podcast the other day, and they said, okay, you've done all these deals, been in it over 25 years. Best advice. You're looking back at advice you'd give to yourself or the new investor. I said, it sounds really cool that I've done, over 1,000 rehabs and, actually over 2,000 rehabs with it. And now new construction, what I said, but my lesson is I wish I had done less of better quality. And so for a lot of real estate investors that want to own rental property long term, they get into that. I need to own how many doors or how many
Right.
houses. Ooh, I got trapped in that being the 100 house club. Oh, great. So I hit that, and then 200 house club. But the problem that was, and these are my early years, I didn't look at the quality. I was just mounting up properties. Oh, but these are actually losing every month or have a lot of turnover or issue, aren't the right areas. And so my big lesson over the years was own less of better quality, own less of better quality. And that saved my time. It created more passive income and equity for me than ever before, owning less of better quality. And I think that's an important thing that can really steer people in the right direction. I wish someone had told me that 25 years ago.
It's true. It's great advice. And that's everybody's question. Oh, how many doors? How many doors? Well, get over
I know
yourself, right? How
people
much
with
money?
100 houses who are flat broke, and I know people with 10 houses who are retired and in a very good situation. So
Exactly.
don't let those that it's almost as bad as the advice I got of, put your head down for 5 to 10 years, get
Yeah.
back to your family, they'll understand.
Yeah.
You don't need that. And especially for busy professionals running businesses, practices out of the area, or they have a big tech job that's costing them several hours a week already. You don't want problem properties several states away. That is a recipe for disaster. And so again, own less, better quality.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. Jim, thank you so much for being with us today.
Now, thanks for the interview, Christine. Happy to be here.
And thank you, listeners, for listening. I bet you can think of probably a big fat handful of people who would has to say, because people who want to learn about investing and people who just want an easy passive way of investing, like a turnkey property, would all love to talk to Jim. Jim, how can we buy your book?
It's on Amazon, Passive Income Playbook or the Family Board Meeting. I actually wrote a family book as well. But you can go right to Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. They're sold both there.
Excellent. And how can people reach you who want to take the next step or at least
Yeah, if you're interested
get
in
more
learning
info?
more about our new construction turnkey program, just go to southernimpressionhomes.com. You'll learn all about our building company, our history, our principles, and get some free advice on real estate investing and maybe some ways to consider doing it.
Excellent. So now take that information, all that will be in the show notes as well, but take that and take your fat handful of people who you know would love to hear what Jim has to say, forward this episode to them because Jim will thank you, I will thank you, and your friends will definitely thank you. And be sure to be with us next week. Thanks.